don't know what
Technically, that was the best one you did. That's what he's saying.
Well, you want to hear it?
Welcome to the A Little Off Track podcast, recorded on Cherry Street in Galesburg, Illinois, with your hosts Eric Hansen, Ted Bievenauer, and Mandy Balser. Joining us today is artist Dusty Scott, an artist whose paintings can be admired and appreciated as you enter Galesburg, walk through the campus of Monmouth College, or enjoy lunch at many local restaurants. His work has been shipped to 27 different states, and he even has paintings hanging in Mexico. Join us as we go a little off track with painter, illustrator, and carpenter Dusty Scott.
Did you come from the work site?
No, but I'm always almost working.
Ready to go?
Ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I am always like, my wife laughs because, you know, when she gets home, not immediately, but pretty close when she gets home, she's kind of like, she's the associate vice president at Carl Sandburg, so cool. She's always dressed up and everything, and so she gets home and she's always like, you know, it's like, let's get in relaxing clothes and comfortable clothes.
Comfy clothes, that's what my wife calls them. First thing in the door, comfy clothes.
And believe it or not, this is my comfy clothes.
That's as comfy as it gets?
This is, I think she would, if she was here, she would be nodding her head at my statement of that. And then I think she would also further that and say that it is a very rare thing that I come out of our bedroom not like you know, fully in work mode.
Wow.
Like whatever. And it's just kind of like my thing. But also I think it's like after having several years now of just working all the time and having to budget that time you know, with my daughter and also, you know, making sure that, you know, Autumn and I spend time together and then having a different, you know, another career outside of art. It's like, it's like if 20 minutes presents themselves, then it's like, then I am maximizing that 20 minutes.
That's amazing.
Know? And
you're one of those people.
Because I'm napping. Like if 20 minutes presents itself, I'm napping.
Yeah.
I see the value in that though. I mean, I really do. Like I you know, it's like typical of like how you're wired. Like you kind of tend to admire like somebody else that maybe has different ways of like dealing with things or whatever. You know, like I have friends that are huge video game players, and I wish that. I mean, there's times that I was like, oh, I wish that would be, because I see what a huge like
because you can't sit and do that for that long period of time, or
I mean, to me,
or you feel like you're being like, oh, I could be getting a lot of stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want this to come across pretentious or anything, but it's just that the way I'm always thinking is in a, like, what could I be doing? Like, what work could I be putting in? Like, what could I be doing?
That makes me feel lazy, Dusty. I'm not going to lie.
I was thinking the same thing.
I think the only thing that I'll say about that, though, is that I think it is counterproductive at times in the sense that, you know, you can work yourself to a point where you need those times to... And I mean, workout. I mean, I still go to the gym and stuff, and so that's like my huge like matter of fact, if I'm going off the rails, like normally Autumn will be like, I think you need to go to the gym, like, you know, kind of thing. But you know, I really, I think there is a huge value in, like, so the taking the naps and doing stuff. It's just not really how I'm wired. So I try to deal with that in a different way and try to get that out of other things. But again, it's not, I see complete value in that and complete, it just...
That's got to be the difference between working for yourself and like having something that you go do 8 hours a day, and then you come home and you're like, oh, I'm going to try and find time for the things that I love versus the thing that I love is the thing that I get to do. Now I have to find that little bit of time to take a break from that thing that I love.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, because, you know, like I started off my career in the fitness industry. So I have my master's in exercise science. So I was a personal trainer and fitness instructor and all this. And I really worked myself out of that career. Like it ended up being a thing after 5 years. I was like, I can't see myself. I enjoy this for myself. I don't enjoy this to be doing this like in this context, like when I'm 45 years old or when I'm 55 years old. It's like, this is not what I see. And to that point, like where you kind of, you know, like you got to get out. I mean, it can be kind of counterproductive sometime with that, but yeah.
By the way, hey, there's water to the left of you.
Oh, thank you.
There's cookies downstairs. Can I get you some coffee?
I'm good.
Do you
good.
notice how he's
Yeah,
pointing
I'm
at you
already-
with his middle
what's
finger?
this?
I've noticed
Wait.
as Eric gets older,
Yeah.
it's all about this.
It's all about this.
I'll get you something.
Like,
Yeah.
you gotta ride the bird at all times.
We've got a painter on a podcast today.
Yay.
Yeah. I woke up this morning and in a panic going, oh, it's podcast day. I'm like, a painter's not going to bring a microphone. And at us starting out, I'll go ahead and say this. Microphones, good microphones for a podcast are not cheap, right?
Yeah.
So we've got one for each of us. And usually artists will, musicians will bring one. I'm like, he's not going to bring a microphone. He's going to bring a paintbrush.
Right?
That's not going to plug in real well.
Yeah.
So
You have to
thanks.
turn that up.
A big last minute thanks to Sir William Colvin at Laid Back Manor Studios.
For real? It's Sir William Colvin?
Sir William Colvin. He's the reason Dusty has a microphone
Awesome.
today. So
That's
yeah.
Yay.
So if you're from Galesburg, Illinois, which we are, music makers, the top of the building has these murals of...
So beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely
4
great.
panels. There's 4.
Very possible that you know Dusty Scott and don't even know him either because you've seen his work. Like driving
Absolutely.
that route up through the.
If you're going west on East Main Street,
Yes.
just past the post office, just at Seminary Street, you
You
look
look
up.
up to your left.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are 4. Jimi Hendrix,
Ray Charles,
Ray Charles.
Yep.
Wait a minute.
the bass player,
Dreadlocks
Jocko.
guy.
Jocko.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
and then
I was going to say
Who's the 4th?
Bob Marley.
Dusty. No, it's not.
No,
Bob
even
Marley.
Dusty's like, wait, I
Well,
was
I know.
hoping
I
you
got
would
to
tell
think
me.
about it for. I was actually just thinking it as you were going through. I'm like,
Is it
I know
Ja-
they're going to ask
is
me
it
something.
Janice?
I'm like, think about it for a minute.
It's not Jan- is it Janice?
No, there's.
They're all dudes.
Buddy Rich.
Buddy Rich.
Yes.
The drummer. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Well, and they were all Dave Plunk's. Like this was like his dream team kind of thing, and so
that's his Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, that was
That's
my
awesome.
not to put words in his mouth, but that was my impression as to this. Yeah, like you said, it was his Mount Rushmore.
That's
Yeah.
pretty great. Yeah.
I got to give Dave a lot of credit because at the time I did those several years ago, but still entrusting me like this was going to be something that was going to be on the outside of the building
Yeah.
and all of that, and so yeah, I mean, and I think it's like any of us along the way, I would assume that. You look back and it's those little things of like people trusting you or like, those little bits that have offered enough encouragement, in a time that you're probably, hyper insecure about what you're doing.
Were
but
you
then,
like, wow, I got to kill this? And what was the anxiety like from good to bad?
Well, I mean, and those are big paintings.
They're-
Like
Yeah.
you see them
Yeah.
from ground level, and you're like, oh,
not
that's
to
awesome.
assume that you get anxiety when a big job comes up.
Oh, I do. Oh, yeah. Yes. Matter of fact, there's times I think like...
But it helps sometimes. It's a part of it fuels
Oh,
you.
100%. I
Yeah.
mean, like, absolutely. And I mean, there is times where I think, am I getting paid enough for the sleep deprivation? like for the
How do you
painting
factor
project?
that in?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm a firm believer that nerves is what keeps you sharp. So I mean, if you become too relaxed and complacent, then that's when, and I still freak out. Like I was doing a painting this morning and I was freaking out, and I mean, it's a regular, and a lot of credit to my wife and my family for always being so encouraging. But, my wife is not only honest with me, like when I run paintings by her to say like, is this up to par with what I do? Does this look right? Is there anything? And I mean, which was sketch in the beginning. Cause like, she's like, well, I think you got this wrong. I'm like, what, kind of thing. So like, but now we worked it out to where it's like, she's completely comfortable with the hard critiques of what I do. But still she knows that, she has to put up with me being like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And I mean, I still go through that ritual.
I totally get that.
yeah.
I mean, like, just from the creation standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
This morning, I'm sitting around my house. I'm a ball of energy, like...
About this?
Yeah, just waiting to come here to do this,
Yeah.
And you get here... We got coffee. Eric has candles. It smells
There's
good.
cookies.
His wife made cookies.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't ask for a better environment to sit around, but just that, like, am I gonna nail this?
Yes.
You know, am I gonna do this thing with the gusto that it needs? And whether it's a painting, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a movie, whatever it be,
Well,
there's,
and I think
there's that thing that keeps you sharp. You know,
that the more the more kind of nervous and on edge that I get with certain things, the counter to that's the huge rush. Like when it comes, I mean, and I mean, I think that's like, I would say, like, from a work standpoint, there's a little bit of an addiction on my part because of that, like, dopamine hit of like when things, you know, like when you are all cranked up and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know, like, what's, you know, I haven't done this kind of painting for, you know, a month or 2 months or something. It's like, I don't even know, you know, and I'm picking things up and I'm fumbling through things. And it's like, what do I start with? What do I even do? Like, I've never done it before, even though I've gotten X amount, you know, 500 paintings done now. And there's still moments where I'm like, wait a minute. Where do I start? Where do I start? And then when it all of a sudden comes together, and typically in a painting, there are a few things where it becomes a teetering point where it crosses over and you're like, I got this. Like, that's not to imply that everything I think I do is like fantastic or anything, but to your skill set level of wherever that may be, there's a point where you're like, okay, like I got a handle on this. I mean, this isn't going to be a complete disaster here. I can get this figured out. And then comes and then when that final deal and you're putting your name on it or whatever, it's like just actually, it doesn't come then. It comes when the client is like, gives you 2 thumbs up, and then you're like, you know, like, then you're just like, you know, like, yeah. So it's, but you know, the confidence is definitely something that fluctuates.
Thanks for listening to A Little Off Track. We hope you're enjoying our discussion with today's guest, artist Dusty Scott.
And Jerry Seinfeld actually has a comedic, I think, line about, he's like, you know, there was a study done and you know, they were talking about what the biggest fears are, and number 1 was public speaking, and number 2 was death, and it's like, and number 2 was death, and it's like you're thinking about that. But I mean, whenever you're putting yourself out there, like in whatever it is, I mean, you're really subjecting yourself, especially when you're not putting yourself out there in a group, and you're, you know, from a singular standpoint. I mean, there is that kind of nutty part to that where you're just like, you know, whether people are saying anything directly to you or whether you're subjecting yourself to thinking that they are potentially critiquing this on their own time and whatnot.
So vulnerable, but so brave. And I think that's what people love about art, is if somebody was brave enough to put this out there. Yeah. Right? And then we all like find this thing about it that resonates with us that we maybe wouldn't have been as brave to put out there. Yeah.
And so I think when you do it, like whatever your medium is, well, I shouldn't say this. This would imply that you know how all people operate, and that's not true. But I think I would say that there seems to be like a common, you know, thing amongst people that are putting themselves out there to have appreciation for other people, that, you know, of what it takes to, even if somebody's putting something out there that's maybe not to your taste or to your whatever, I mean, it still takes something to really, especially when you see somebody that puts the work in. Like when I was listening to your guys' podcast with Joe Stam, I mean, I just, like, I love a wide range of music, but I am far from anybody that can, but I do like to think that I can kind of recognize like craftsmanship and hard work. I mean, and so when I'm listening to him and I'm listening to whatever, it's like, I'm like, this is a person that's put the work in.
Yeah. Well, and then the visceral results afterwards when Mandy's crying.
Well, I did hear that too. Yeah.
I vowed today to cry less. Right. So I'm not saying I won't. Okay. I don't know what you're going to say, but I'm going to try really hard not to be so emotional.
Okay. So,
but that's the impact. That's the,
it was intense to be in here with him.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know, I mean, there was just like this palpable energy of someone pouring their hard work. I mean, he's written the lyrics, and it's like you feel that just as much as you stand in front of a piece of art. And, you know, if you're in an art museum, there's a reverence to like walking piece to piece and going like, whoa.
Well, like, I don't know how old Joe is, because I know just a little bit about him, and but I mean, as far as from the podcast,
54.
So I mean, just the idea of like
from Metamora, by the way.
Yeah. But you know, whether it be him or, I mean, like, when you just think of the time, you know, the time put in, because you know, very seldom do you fall, you know, butt backwards into good situations. I mean, you normally are, you know, having to, I mean, the grind that it takes to get somewhere, and then, and then when you just can observe somebody, like I have a friend of mine that's on Instagram, and she does makeup professionally.
Cool.
And it's like, you know, I don't know anything about makeup, you know, but when I see like her work, I'm like, that is just so good. I mean, there's just something about when you can recognize that somebody has just put this crazy amount of work in, and it's like, wow, you know, that's just fantastic. I mean, I'm always just super fascinated by that.
If you want to see a crazy amount of great work, DustyScottArt.com. You can't see it. You're not going to hear his paintings here in the studio. But if somebody meets you and they don't know you're a painter, and you get a kinship and you say you are a painter, how do you describe that to someone? What kind of painter are you?
Well, it's always funny because it always seems like it comes off like really pretentious. Like, well, I'm an artist.
I know. Why is
you know,
that
and,
the
and I mean,
case?
and
Why is that
it's
the case?
I don't know, but it's like such a weird thing. It's like promoting yourself. Like, it's very counterintuitive to how we're taught to be, you know, typically,
So
like most
true.
people are taught to be modest, don't talk about yourself, and if you
dampen
do,
the ego.
and then there's a fine line between, you know, I tell my wife that, you know, like, confidence is like what we tell ourselves, and ego is what you tell other people, you know, and so you're having to like work against that, like, and kind of override that system and be like, because of the fact that, like, if you don't tell people, then people may never know, and you may not get to be able to share this thing that you're passionate about. But yeah, it's so typically what I think I've gotten pretty decent at it, to the point where, although it still feels awkward to me at times, like there's times where I can kind of just, I never give hard sales. So I'm never into like, but I always just like to present people with an option to look. And even when people inquire, like they say, well, I'd like to hire you to do a commission, you know, like how do we go about this? Like, and if I get a price together for them, like normally it's always with a tagline at the end, like there's no pressure. Like, I don't expect people to know how much something costs. Like, it's normally uncharted territory. I'm not trying to give, you know, I want like this to be a good thing for them, and I want it to be a good thing for me, where we're both excited, and that we're both, you know, if there's any uneasiness in that, then it's not going to be good for me. And for the longest time, I could not bring myself to call myself an artist, like, because that just seemed like, it seemed so loaded. Like, I had to defend this on like so many different levels, and I just didn't feel prepared to defend it. You know, I just thought,
why
like,
is that word artist? Why is that?
You know, that, Eric, when you and I first started working together, and Eric had decades in the industry before me, and it took me a very long time to be able to say the word broadcaster when it came to what
you just
I
couldn't
was
get it out.
Yeah.
because that wasn't me. That's not what. Oh wait, that's what we did.
Yeah.
You know, so I get that there's an like an uneasiness. Like, I don't want to come off like this, but this is what I do.
But
and
artists
this is the talent that I'm trying to get out there.
And more so than broadcaster, artist seems to carry a little more pretension. You know, like you said, people.
Yeah, and I don't know if in the music industry, if somebody says I'm a musician, maybe it has the same kind of context. You know, I don't know like what level of, but again, like whatever your thing
Whatever
is,
your
it might
art
be,
is, whatever your
I
thing
mean,
is.
even in the construction industry, like saying that I am, you know, that I'm like a carpenter, you know, it's like I think it's like, you know, I think when you hold something, you know, maybe this is it, maybe it's not, but like when you hold something in such a high regard, like as to what, you know, you put something that of that nature of what you're aspiring to do,
you feel
on kind
like
of
you
a pedestal.
need a body of work.
Yeah, you feel like
And-
you need, and for you to be the one that's endorsing this and be like, yes, I am this,
Right.
you know, compared to when somebody else says it, it's just, you know, it's more comforting to hear somebody else say it sometimes maybe than what, maybe not, but I mean, as far as it is a challenging thing. for me, I think it was just eventually a breakdown to the point where it's just too hard to say this any other way. So eventually it's like I submit, I'll just say that I'm an artist and then I'm a painter or whatever.
Here's my work.
Right.
Here's my work.
Well, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. So we've talked a little bit about the murals. Where else might we find or be able to see?
Let me tell you, in the bathrooms at La Cantonita, probably...
that has to be the strangest place.
Eric told me about that.
Listen, 2 days after Mandy had told me, we got Dusty Scott on the show, I go with my wife. She was meeting some friends at La Cantonina, and we're sitting there, and I'm telling her, I said, that painting right there, we're looking directly at, I go, that's Josh Dixon. I think a little bit of it is Dusty Scott. And I said, outside, the big mural, I go, that's both of them, they worked on that together.
Yeah.
And then a little bit later, I take a trip, and I'm standing there, and out of both eyes, I'm like, wait, that's a Dusty Scott. That's a Dusty Scott. I'm like, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
So you were watching Eric P. in the bathroom of La Cantonita. Okay.
In spirit. Yeah.
In spirit.
You're right.
Do you have a piece at Craft as well?
I don't have a piece at Craft. I did have a show at Craft, and then I have...
Where's the Lincoln? So
there's a couple of Lincolns. Mark and Jeanette Klein bought a Lincoln, and they have one in their home, and then they... and then there's one that's in, or there's two Lincolns that are in Big Cats.
Okay.
And so,
okay.
Yeah, so in Big Cats is another place that has another. There's also there's a veterinary clinic that has some of my work. There's two veterinary clinics, one in Galesburg, one in Knoxville, that have some of my work.
How about
El Rancherito? The ones that are in La Cantonita, like Dixon and I worked on the mural together, but Frida and Pancho Villa, those were mine independently.
Wait a minute. Are you the men's restroom Dusty in El Rancherito?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
because I always look at that guy.
That sounds sketch anyway. But I am glad to tell you that both, no matter how you take that, the answer is no.
Yeah, exactly. Not following down that route.
That came out bad.
We meant is one of your paintings
there is
hanging?
a painting in the restroom of El Rancherito, and it's of this guy who's passed out behind the outhouse, and the wife who's like, "Where are you?"
Yeah, they had some murals done, like, and there's a place.
I swear it said Dusty.
I don't know. Maybe
it said Rusty.
It's an imposter.
They have 3 paintings in there, but all of them are out at 3 or 4 paintings, and they're all out in the main deal. And then there's it's terrible to. I mean, it's both good and bad. There's times like where. I've been fortunate enough to have them in enough places now that a lot of times I'll forget. So there's places that I know that they're in, like Monmouth College and various other places that I forget about them until I go in there. I got Carl Sandburg College and some other.
It's like, oh wow, that's
and then all of a sudden I walk in, or like I'll get a random text message from somebody that's like in a place of business that'll have one of my paintings, and they're like, with the cheese kind of like with my name, which is super flattering and fantastic. And it's like when that happens, it's like it's like, oh yeah, and I think
that was there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I suppose just like doing audio production, which I've done for years, you kind of get into a groove, and you kind of get into a trademark of sound of what your stuff might sound like, right? How do you fall in? Because your stuff, there's wholesome stuff, there's sweet stuff, there's stuff that looks very rock
edgy,
and roll,
and
takes an edge. Is that like, I'm not going to get stuck in this? I'm always challenging yourself?
I'm so glad that you said that, because you guys probably didn't get a chance to go to see my show with Stacey Lotes, but that show was like a real mix. I mean, I had mixed media, I had sculpture, and I had paintings and all kinds of stuff in there. And it was an opportunity. It was a real kind of crossroads, like when it came to like with the show, it's like, okay, I can either go down this road where I can make a bunch of stuff that I think will sell, or I can have this opportunity to just make a stuff that's really relevant to me. And I opted to go to the really relevant, and to my surprise, a huge bulk of it ended up selling, which was fantastic, which was encouraging just in its own right, to think to taking that leap for anyone that you could have that result. But I tried to apply a principle that my dad in the construction business has done, where like one thing, and I'm going to paraphrase like how.
Go ahead and name drop your dad, by the way.
Danny Scott Builders and Sons.
Yes.
Danny Scott.
Yeah,
And I
cool.
work with my brother TJ, who's a fireman in town, and
we love TJ.
yeah, he's fantastic.
Remind me of
everybody
TJ's
loves
story
TJ.
later, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, I got one.
And I did buy Joe Stam's record for TJ.
Yes, we're going to talk about that too. Yeah, that's great.
So, but anyway, but one thing that, to paraphrase on what he said about construction over the years is that, essentially if you're going to be a frame carpenter, and that's all you want to do, or you only want to be a finish carpenter, then theoretically, when that work dries up, like you don't have work. And so if you just become like this one, so there's a couple ways.
That's great.
Yeah.
Though,
So
man.
from a business standpoint, I think, the more versatile you will be, then the slower one area gets, that means another area can pick up. But then, so there is that from the business perspective. But then the other side is like from a creative perspective, and just the feeling of outlet, I find it very hard to, like for instance, if you're a country musician, and again, I don't know anything about music, but I would imagine like if you got like a song that is blues and you just want to put this blues song out, like having to feel like that like the only thing that encompasses like what you're feeling and what you want to do is only in this kind of one element,
Yeah.
and I think for some people that probably is the true. They kind of hone that craft of that area, and then they feel that's this, that they feel the most, maybe control or creative quality in that. But for me, I just try to, like, I'll do something for a little while, and then I'm like, I want to do something, I want to break out of this and do something else, and I want to do, so it's just kind of, it's like, and I think in order to do that, like for me personally, you have to also realize that there's going to be some things that you're going to be, like, much stronger in.
Yeah.
But if the thing that I want to do is in this other area, like, I'm going to take the risk of not being as good at, like maybe it's not up to par with, but it's because that's the way I feel like it needs to be made. Like it doesn't work.
And by branching out, you're not painting yourself into that corner.
Yeah.
And this is the only thing I do.
Unintended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be brave enough to suck at something new.
Celebrating local artists, featuring their talent, and not taking anything too seriously. On the A Little Off Track podcast with Eric Hansen, Ted Bievenauer, and Mandy Balser.
I don't know if you do it on all your paintings, but you like to go big, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Your stuff, why is that? Why is it because of your building background with your father and
I don't know if it's so much that.
the bigger the better? Because you got some big stuff.
If I do action style painting, it is such a rush. Like to be like
Describe what that means. What's action
like
style?
So
Jackson Pollock, like moving and grooving.
Well,
and...
I call it like for instance, if anybody's been to La Cantonita, like my Frida Kahlo there or Pancho Villa, those are like my action style type deal where the brush strokes are kind of like a little bit, they're less refined, they're more radical. The color choices are more radical. Like I'll assign like a color, a temperature, so to speak, in the painting.
Is your Louis Armstrong an action? Kind of an action?
Yeah. That would have been early.
You seen
stages.
that?
Where is it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's on his website. It's beautiful. I don't know where it's at, but it's it's in there.
Actually, the president of Monmouth College bought that. Wow. A cool story about that. I walk in to meet President Wyatt, Clarence Wyatt, first time, and I'm an alum of Monmouth, so I was back to do like a kind of a little show in Wallace Hall, and I walk in there, and Stacy Lotes is introducing us, and I brought like my two paintings, which one was Albert Einstein, and the other one was Louis Armstrong, and and super, super nice guy, and he's like, oh, what do you got here? And I didn't bring price tag. I didn't have any concept of what I was going to sell them for or anything like that. And he's like, and he sees the one, and within like seconds, he's like, is that for sale? And I said,
everything's
almost
for sale.
everything
Right.
is for
Do you
sale,
like a
right?
shirt?
And so all of a sudden, I just was like, so I just came up with something on the spot, and he said, I'll take it. And it was just like one of those sweet circumstances.
Did you wish you had set a higher number?
There are there are times in the past where that's happened. In that moment, it was just such a cool thing to have.
Totally.
I bet your wife's the one that reminds you of that later. How much?
Right.
You did what?
Right. There are moments where, you're in negotiations with somebody, especially trying to get the tempo when they're from a larger area sometimes, and you're trying to kind of, you want to get the job, but you're also thinking about all the work involved, and you're kind of, and there are those moments where when it's an effortless yes, you're like, oh crap. I could have, because not so much that you're trying to work them, but because of the time that you put in and the stress.
Sure.
I mean, I just had a painting that is on its way to Mexico right now, and it was a 40 by 50, which is an untraditional size canvas, and I only had one, and so these people were traveling to Mexico, and I had to ship it to Texas so they could get it in Texas and then go to Mexico with it. And the reason why is you can ship UPS through Mexico, but there could be some sketchy things that the rules aren't obviously always what they are here. So going through customs and all that kind of stuff,
sure.
It can be tricky. So this is the way I actually I actually took the canvas off the frame, rolled it up, repacked it, disassembled the frame, gave them instructions on how to reassemble it and the whole thing. So anyway, this is the second time we've done this, but the stress of knowing that they're leaving by this certain point, and it's not, I don't want to imply that they're putting a lot of stress on, it's stress I'm putting on myself to meet their deadline.
This was a case where you weren't there when the client saw the painting for the first time. You weren't there.
No, I won't be there. Matter of fact, they sent me one that I did. The first one I did for them. What was so great is I'm on a job site, working with my dad and my brother, and I'm getting a phone call, and they're in Tulum, Mexico, and they're like, "Hey, we got a question about something," and they're assembling my painting in Tulum, which is such a weird. And again, I've had really cool experiences where, my paintings have shipped to 27 states now. And so, it's been a lot of neat things like that. But that was one where it's here I'm on probably scaffolding or a ladder, and I'm talking to somebody in beautiful, this beautiful exotic place kind of thing or whatever.
A reminder of the other part of your life.
Right. And it's so, yeah. And, but the pressure to okay, if I don't get this right, if something's not right about this, and I have to go to Blick to order another canvas, it could, they're normally pretty fast in pulling, but if they don't have it because it's not a regular canvas, and it's well, that'll be 3 weeks, it's I'm going to blow that deadline. So it's this is a one, or, if you have really invested, if you've actually constructed a canvas yourself, with what I did with the music makers, and I'm doing some paintings for, Knoxville Fire Department, and so I'm building those canvases now. And so some of that customization, that if you don't get it right, then all your labor that went into constructing those things ends up being so, it's suspenseful. So when it comes to the payment factor of it, when I said, I think early on about, does this compensate for the sleepless nights, of sitting there thinking, and then being in the groove of some of those things, the last one I did that did go to Mexico, I was talking to my wife, which she's fantastic about this, but I was I got to get, there's certain kinds of paintings that I have to kind of get in a zone with, and I kind of have to, and that's far better done when no one else is probably around, or just so that way I can.
How do you do that?
Focus in that stuff,
Do you have a process? Do you meditate? What does that look like?
I do meditate, but but that's not typically before. Rarely is it before a painting, unless sometimes I'll do that
because I see you coming in, the doors opening, coming out.
Yeah,
big
standing up.
Smoke
is there
coming
music?
out.
What
music starts playing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of times it's music, and what I'll do is I'll start to get out, or first in prep I'll pick out my palette. So I'll start pulling out all these paints and kind of surround the area and kind of get the work area set up. If it's an action style painting, I'll lay a drop cloth down because, to try to contain the mess.
Get messy.
Right, exactly. And then I'll start laying out books of things that I like of all different kinds of paintings. There there could be 6 or 7 different books out, like flipped open to certain pages, dog-eared to other ones, you know, where I'm like referencing like you know, how these colors are working together and how I like this
that
one
when
and
you
that
said
one.
that earlier, the temperature.
Yeah, I wanted
of the
you to go
painting.
back to that, the temperature of a paint.
Because I can totally feel that, you know, like if it's, does this one make me feel cold and blue, or is this warm and bright, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of like the, you know, like the Picasso's blue period or whatever, you know, like you're trying to kind of get like what is wanting to, and a lot of times when I do like portraits, like, you know, like for instance, this one that went to Mexico, it's about Alma Reed, and so the lady commissioned this, but I researched about the lady and and then painted accordingly to that, like again the temperature, but also assigning colors like in that palette, like ahead of time to like what's going to be like my medium kind of hue color, you know, like what colors are going to be in the mid range, what colors are going to be the darkest darks, which might be navy blue as opposed to black, or there might be something or a dark purple or whatever that I might assign a certain kind of thing.
So you plot that out before you even go in.
Yeah, sometimes it changes on the fly. Like, and that's another thing, is just wanting to like go with your instinctual feel. I find that's what's really tough sometimes, is like when sometimes people want to hire you and they kind of really want to be the brush, and they want you to be the brush, but they want to be, that can be really tough. But I mean, what's best is when somebody kind of gives you a general idea and then they just turn you loose and say, do whatever you think is best.
What are you listening to?
So I listen to all kinds of music, but when I do those kind of paintings, I listen to, I'm not Irish, but I listen to like Irish Celtic music,
sure.
Like fast paced, fast tempo. Yeah. There's something kind of like it's, and I always think it's funny because like when I'm at the gym, I always think, there's probably, and this is pretentious because this would imply that anybody would even be paying attention to me and even wondering what I would.
No, everybody watches everybody.
Right,
if we're a fly on the wall, are you active? Or is it funny to watch Dusty Scott paint?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, but I always think like when I'm at the gym, like nobody probably would imagine what's in my headphones right now. You know what I mean? Like sometimes like I'll get on like a big band kick and I'll just be listening to big band music, or I'll be listening to like just whatever. I mean, like anything, or it's podcasts, or most of the time if I listen to audiobooks, it's something on philosophy, or it's something on, you know, psychology or something like that. And so I always think that, you know, sometimes like, you know, being a kind of chameleon like that way, I guess, with what your interests are. But, you know, so why the Irish thing? It just ended up being like, I think one time I was just on this kick of like listening to that style of music, and I happened to be doing one of those paintings, and now it's just my thing. That like when I do those, it's just like, that's kind of like, you know, like a switch, you know, turns on to where I start to kind of, but when you get that tempo, then it becomes like a tempo pace thing, where it's no longer like methodically, like slowly going over things with brush strokes. It's like rapidly working, and that's why sometimes it's best if no one's around, because not because I couldn't stand to have somebody watch me, but you can't interrupt the tempo.
Yeah.
Because
so this isn't a happy tree. This is a no underwear under the kilt sort of painting.
Right.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah.
Tell us about the work philosophy that you have, though. I've been at many events where these huge works are there, and I recognize them. I find out, okay, it's another Dusty Scott a painting that has been donated.
$40,000. That's the number, right?
Yeah, it's a little over $40,000.
$40,000 worth of art that has been donated.
No
Charitable.
shit.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
To help
That's
people
amazing.
in different avenues.
Yeah, mainly locally. I mean, there's been a few things that have gone to like Easter Steels. There was a person that took a painting of mine down to Wounded Warriors, I believe, down in like a event they had in Florida, and they auctioned it off there, which I'm sure, like in the slew of whatever, it wasn't like a newspaper worthy kind of like sale, but I mean, it's just.
Does doing that work, does that help Dusty Scott get out of his own head? Like, it's not always about me. Well, I can lift someone up with what I do.
Sure, you know, I think like, you know, despite the fact that in this world, like currently, you know, we seem to a lot of times feel like we're at real with odds with different people that have different viewpoints, but generally at the core of it, I don't think we're all that much different, you know, like in a lot of different, I mean, that's my personal belief. And so I think that there's, you know, a general compassion that you have for a fellow human being that is under, you know, dire straits for whatever it might be, or or it's an organization, like for instance, like the YMCA or.
Tell us about a big work that meant a lot to you that raised some big cash and really helped out a group or
I had, I'll tell you, like people locally that would know, I've known Brad Davis for a long time. He was a few years ahead of me. He works on the railroad, but he, played high school baseball, and I would have been probably, I don't know how many years older than Brad is than me, but I don't even know if he was in the high school by the time I was there. But he lived in one of my buddy's neighborhoods, and always super cool guy, super nice. He could have always taken a route that he could have been not a nice guy, but he was, because he was bigger and all that kind of stuff. Super nice guy. But anyway, fast forward years later, we're still friends enough, like not close friends, but enough to say hello and how's it going and remembering each other. And unfortunately, his son, Benton Davis, had ended up getting cancer, and I'd heard about it. And, I didn't know, like typical, like even to this day, I don't want to assume that somebody wants something of mine. It's like you offer it and say,
sure.
Like, would you like me to do this? And unfortunately, because of my daughter now, I can't do this as much as what I used to, just
sure.
being so busy. But at that time, my daughter wasn't born yet. And so I reached out to them and they agreed, they said, yeah, absolutely. So I did this painting and went there, and I actually brought 500.
They didn't know what you were going to do.
No, I think I may have told them, but I brought $500 in my own pocket, and I thought, if this doesn't sell for $500, I'm just going to buy it back, and I'll just donate the money or whatever. And so we're there, and all of a sudden, it's just boom, 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 and all of a sudden it hits 1,000, almost right out of the gate. Not right out of the gate, but it pretty quickly. And then it was.
Did you make
2,000.
an audible phew?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and then it was 2,000, and then it got to 3,000, and then it was 4,000, and then it worked its way up to. I think it was in the end it was either 4,200, 4,500, and that was just such a and at that time, I think some of my family was there, and it was an emotional. It was emotional for my family because I think it was also one of those first times that somebody witnesses something you are doing and realizes that maybe this is bigger than
legit.
And so that'll always
the impact.
My mind. Yeah. And ironically,
I always knew Dusty liked to do his little paintings, but what is this?
Yeah. And every time I've had a really cool thing like that happen. I've always thought to myself, okay, after this event, I'm gonna take 5. I'm gonna take a break, or I'm gonna take a day off.
I have on here that you wanted to take a nap as a reward, and I thought that was just the sweetest thing.
Yeah.
That you worked so hard that you were gonna take a nap, but then you didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my work at Monmouth College. I was so nervous about that work because they were gonna have an unveiling. Nobody had seen my work except for the president. President Wyatt asked to see it. Literally the day before. I think he never said this, but I'm sure it's to make sure that I wasn't putting stick figures up at college. But anyway.
I was thinking penises,
right,
but okay,
exactly, yeah. So to verify there's no penises hidden in those
stick figures with penises.
Right. Yeah. If you see penises, you might have something else going on.
Right, that's all on you. That's not on me.
Right. So, but anyway, but then when I've had cool things like that happen, when they're over, it always is in my head that I'm afraid, don't let that be the top of the mountain. Get back, and start climbing again. Figure out what the next thing is or whatever. And not just in trying to get high dollar charity amount prices or whatever.
Just to push yourself.
But just the idea of get back out there and don't let this be the last of the situations where 20 years from now you're talking about, well, there was this one time. It's I want a lot of times of different various other things.
What's competition for a painter, a Dusty Scott? Your last painting? That's the only competition, right?
Yeah, some people I think probably. I had made a little bit of reference to the one that you were maybe listening, or when I had met at the other podcast thing that I did. But there was an internal thing that happened to me, and I remember this pretty vividly in second or third grade, where there was an awards assembly at Nielsen School, and I didn't get any awards. And I remember there was one of my friends was just killing it on the awards. She was going up and she was just getting all these laminated pieces of paper, and she was killing social studies, killing this. And then she got the most pull-ups. And I'm like, damn. And I really do remember this, thinking I want those, I want awards, and I want, and not just And it wasn't to be competitive with her, and I'm kind of reiterating this is what I've said before. It wasn't to be competitive with her. It was a self-competitive thing that really kind of clicked at that time. And so in the pursuit of that, then, luckily that in the next year, I was the one getting the paper laminate pieces of work, not like boxing out. I mean, they didn't give just one out, so it wasn't like I boxed out other people there became a self-competitive nature with that. And I think sometimes what's tricky is like when you do get into the arts, whether it's, I'm sure it's this way with music or whatever, there can be a lot of, there can be people that tend to start fighting against themselves, even though like we're all just trying to get out there and make it, But for me, it's really, it's all internal pressure of just trying to, and I attribute this not just into my art, but also as a person, and I think that's why my interest is in reading about philosophy and reading about different things it's always like, what can I do to try to be better?
Grow.
Grow. Yeah, that would be a better thing. And, one of my idols growing up was Bruce Lee, and he was a philosophy major actually in college. And, but, in all his writings, he never wrote in all his notes, he never wanted to write a book. And if there's a historian out there, they may correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that because he never wanted to write anything down as a doctrine for people to think that this is how, because he looked at himself as ever evolving kind of thing. And so I think of that in that, whether it be with art or whether it be with me personally, you're just trying to, we're all trying to figure things out all the time. And the way we feel about something today, if I can learn something new that might make either clarify that thought and or maybe change that thought, later on. And so, it's a lot of self-competitive element.
See, there's not a lot of work that you can do in life. And a lot of us want to leave a mark, right? We do that with the ones that are left. With music and books and paintings. That's got to be important to you.
It's so ironic you say that. That's my romanticized view, is that I've done over 500 and some projects now, paintings and various other kind of pieces of art.
Yeah.
And my hope is that something will live beyond my time here. And that out of all those, some of them will meet their demise in a moldy basement, or they'll, there'll be those, or something doesn't match the couch or something anymore, so it'll find its way out or whatever. But the idea, there's a romanticized idea that what if out of all those things, 100 years from now, there's one of those or a couple of those that are just still floating around where. And the weird thing is not that even anybody would know who the hell I was, kind of thing, who the name was, but just the idea to think that what if I made something that somebody still saw some sort of value in.
The story lives on, you've put something in a place where it may be tattered because of elements, but that story has something that these people are going to be able to talk about.
No one's ever letting that Louis Armstrong go to a basement and get dusty.
No.
I hope it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
I think when I do even the paintings for people that are on a more personal level, there's part of me that sometimes thinks that, if this is hanging in somebody's grandmother's house, or somebody that maybe is not a grandmother yet, but eventually will be, or a grandpa, and if their grandkids go over there and they're like, oh, I always remember this painting at grandma's house or grandpa's house. And so, and the natural course of life as it goes, that there's a time where those things get dispersed out to family and loved ones, and thinking, again, how flattering would it be? And of course it'll be something that I'd likely never know unless they were to reach out to me. But it's just a romanticized idea of the romantic nature of thinking that could, somebody picking that out as one of those items and then having it then technically could have a longevity of another 40 years or something, and somebody else's home being protected.
Oh, dude, I totally get it. My dad is a woodworker, creates beautiful furniture. And if you were to go over to my parents' house, on the back of everything are initials of who gets it when they die.
Oh, wow.
So because I live in town, have more initials on the back of some of the projects.
Sneak over when no one's home.
Like TB. But those are things that are going to live on just exactly like that. Like they will come to my house. My daughter will inherit those things. He built this bed out of a tree that he used to swing in when he was a kid for my daughter. And that thing will live through generations. These beautiful pieces of art, whatever the medium, you know, like for him, it's wood, for you, it's paint or multimedia. For us, it's something different, but they will live through generations. And I am I'm in love with that idea of knowing that this thing that you create will go beyond where we are right now on this earth.